We gotta talk about this, guys. It's crazy.
So T1 were actually kind of cooking in these drafts, and to the point where they even stated that they predicted every single pick in game one. And they cooked so hard that even though my attempts to predict the entire draft with the spreadsheet that I had here, they cooked up things that I didn't even probably think of. And this just kind of goes to show how creative this team was. And this video is pretty much going to highlight some of the strategies they were going for and kind of understand and break down some of their decisions in order to basically just consistently get a really good lead in draft every single game without fail. And this is because they leveraged matchups and leveraged champions that Weibo were clearly not prepared for. And clearly, as the games went on, they really had no idea what to do in order to answer some of these picks. They had pretty much prepared everything into every single scenario and every common opener in the game. And they even ditched some of the things that were very successful for them in the past leading up to this game. They did not even play Rel a single time in this series, if you know. And Owner's Rel has been something that's been really good the entire series. So let's start with game one. According to what they were banning here, there are some things that people were going to guess that they were going to ban. So there's a couple of routes they went for, and starting on red, obviously they banned Nico the entire series, and they actually opted for the Orianna Azir match bans. So this is something that's probably going to happen here because of the opener that they were preparing for. And the only other thing, I did mention that the two things that this series were going to be based off of were whether the Zeus was going to be able to get winning matchups on top side, and this was circumvented by this was facilitated by the Rumble ban, as well as the AD carry meta in terms of getting counter pick and securing and preparing for whatever Weibo was going to open. So the only other ban I would note here is the Sylas ban, which leads into the Maokai B1. So because of this, T1 actually, this is probably the worst draft that, in my opinion, from out of all three games, ironically, even though this is the draft that they fully predicted. So because of this, my impression is that this is a draft that you should definitely not try at home. The reason for this is because this is a draft that probably scales with the strength of the players. So only a team as good as T1 would be able to pilot something like this. So we see the Kalista Renata opener, which up until this point has been pretty much well established as one of the primary sort of openers for teams because of its ability to even just go through all matchups and just deal with everything. Even like things with the Varus Ashe, you still have agency, you can still force things on your side of the map. So that's why it's been picked. But the subsequent picks are where it gets interesting. Weibo opened Jace Aatrox, which is both solo laners, and I was thinking about this a little bit. And the reason they probably did both of these is to, one, answer the shorter range that they've already established with the Kalista Renata 1-2, as well as potentially take away the Aatrox from Zeus. But this is a very sort of risky move to go for, because this kind of throws away the whole pool of bottom counter picks for Weibo. So this also gives the Yone opener or Yone R3 available, allowing T1 to ban Varus Ashe and actually choking the jungle pool very heavily. Because of this, T1 actually go for the Ahri pick in order to answer the Jace, and to also facilitate Kalista Renata. But this is where I actually think Weibo had the better draft, because this is something that, when you see these final picks, the whole point of the Kalista Renata identity is to really dominate lane, but it's diluted by something like the Senatom. So the whole idea behind this comp is that it's going to give a really slow chokehold and give not much room for T1 to really play. It's also supplemented by a seemingly weird on the surface Lee Sin R5 into a lot of champions that don't seem on the surface to be able to care about Lee, to be honest with you. But even this draft did accordingly go to their entire plan. So that's why I theorize that T1 are confident. This is a draft that is based off of T1's confidence that they are able to fully just take over the game and utilize their strengths as players in order to circumvent normal draft dynamics. If you're basically any other level of play, this is probably not favored for T1 at all, but because they have such high levels of execution and these champions have so much skill expression, and they were basically drafting for their hands. And because of this, still stylistically, T1's comp is still able to, reach the backline and go through this comp that is effectively an impenetrable fortress. It is something that is very unique and would be a bad draft in a lot of other scenarios. So, also, Xiaohu looks really bad on Jace in this game, and although looks like I'm just flaming him, it's actually significant because this establishes that because it was really unsuccessful in game 1, this means that Weibo basically aren't going to be able to play it in future comps, and this opens up a lot of like front to back options for T1 as well. So with that being said, in game 2, I think there's actually quite a drop off in terms of the draft plans for Weibo, because their original plan did not work and they have to try something different now, right? So they banned the Ashe again, which obviously signifies the Kalista opener. Obviously, it's actually a pretty premeditated sort of opener, and it looks like T1 also had a different chain ready for that. So they broke up the Renata and actually took the Draven. The main trade-off with this is that you get a fantastic matchup into Kalista and you take the Renata away, but you're locked into a Draven comp. So the rest of this draft is basically going to be based off of what Weibo's answers are, and if T1 have anything to prepare to answer that. We get the Kalista Senna matchup that we have actually seen in the past a little bit, which is a little bit of a weirder dynamic, but does work for some teams. But it's because it's common, I'm sure T1 has something prepared for that. The Sylas R3 kind of secures this because he already has pretty good ults and hedges against other potential picks in the mid lane. And this is where it gets super interesting. So on 4, T1 actually lock the Nocturne. This is most definitely a prepared pick, and one that is meant to specifically answer what Weibo are going for, right? Compared to the first game where Weibo picked Senna, this is actually very, very hard for Senna to play, because compared to the first game, Senna doesn't have the same tools to bail her out of these bad scenarios where champions like Sylas and Nocturne that are going to go forward straight onto her, there's not really any tools that Weibo can have in order to create space. So basically the long and the short of this is T1 forced this dynamic in the bottom lane so that they could basically dissect them with the rest of their comp. The fact that they shelled themselves into a Draven comp or a Draven matchup in the bottom side was actually in their favor, because T1 wanted to manipulate the entire comp environment of the game so that their picks on 4-5 can not only secure them a winning comp, but also pretty much winning matchups across the board, right? This is supplemented with the Weibo self-counter pick on R5, on B5 rather, with the Ahri, and the inability to really be flexible on top side with the Shy. I'm not sure if it's like a coach gap or something, but like it really seemed like he wasn't allowed to play much strong side in this match at least, or have any variance in terms of his matchups, and it really showed here. Like, he was not able to play the game. He was constantly just pushed in, had very little resources, and like you can just tell from here, right? In the beginning, he's still unable to really get much on the board, right? He has a CS deficit from the very beginning. He has because of Owner having pressure on basically the entire top side, the entire map, honestly, and he's just denying, like, letting this Maokai not even breathe. So again, all these pivots and just coercing Weibo into the comps that they want them to play is the name of the game here. It's the most obnoxious with Game 3 because apparently Weibo are also allergic to Renata and don't want to play the matchups that are favorable into it. So I would say they actually lose a ban over this, right? In other games, they banned Azir instead of this, but the Renata ban, I would say, is almost like a lesser version of it. I even predicted that there was a chance that this opener, which Weibo ended up going for because they mismatched bans on 3, so only Orianna was banned. I predicted that Faker would actually prepare either Sylas or Akali into the Azir and actually have to bust out some forward comps. This is supplemented by the Zyra Rakan opener on 1-2. And Weibo looked very confused here in terms of the answer. So because they banned out this answer themselves in Ashe, right? If you go these various Ashe lanes, or if you went like Ashheimer, like it would have been very successful. But the thing with this is they banned it out themselves, so they only have 1/2 available. And you can just tell, right? Like this answer here doesn't really do anything, and they're playing like a front to back comp with a champion that doesn't actually get pressure against Zaire Khan. So even from the first 3 picks, I basically don't really have to see the rest of the draft. It's just full forward from here. I would say the most redeeming pick in this case is probably like the Bel'Veth and the Kennen, but again, there's just so much agency across the map for T1, and it just goes to show that it's not even about like the ability to adapt on the fly here would have been very, very crucial for Weibo, but T1 just had so many scenarios prepared, and it's really, really apparent here, right? In this draft, they have pretty much solid lanes all around it once more. They're playing to dissect, but they have a lot of ways to do so, and they're not really worried against the defensive comps here, right? There's so many other picks that you could have tried, right, in terms of answering, but like Weibo really didn't have much that came to mind in this case, and they just weren't prepared for some of these openers. Like Varus Bard into Zaire Khan when you're roaming into Kennen is not ideal, right? So they probably forgot that they had to deal with Zaire Khan, and they lose. And this could have been circumvented by, picking it themselves, thinking about it if that was an opener. But they were too concerned about maybe some really specific things that T1 were going for, and this like just change in styles for like pretty much every game allowed them to really come on top, right? The T1 basically drafted forward every game, by the way, and clearly Weibo were not able to answer. So this pivot is basically what drafts are about, and honestly, although they had really great gameplay, I think what really shined, at least in my eyes, was the preparation, and that was the point of going through this. Hopefully this makes sense to you all, and you appreciate this insight, and I'll catch you in the next one.